Hello everyone. Today I'll be discussing about paper number 7, that is Technology of Milk and Milk Products. In this particular paper, again I'll be taking module number 23, which deals with technology of cheese manufacture. In this technology of cheese manufacture, there are totally 3 parts, in which here I'm going to deal the first part, which deals with number 1, the milk quality, the ingredients used, and the classification of the cheese. Every one of us knows that the raw material quality, that is the milk, maybe cow milk or buffalo milk, is the prime importance whenever we want to prepare any cheese of a good quality. So first we will see which milk is more suitable for preparation of a given cheese variety, and supposing we go for some milk of other breeds or species, what would be the differences in the quality of the cheese made thereof. Looking into the ingredients, again there are n number of ingredients which a cheesemaker would like to use. To give some example, we start, if you use a cow milk, it definitely needs addition of calcium chloride at the rate of say 0.01% by weight of the milk, so that you can get a firm curd similar to what you obtain from a buffalo milk cheese. Another ingredient, let's take rennet, which is a proteolytic enzyme, very important in cheese making because you get the rennet curd exactly in about half an hour from the time we add the proteolytic enzyme. So rennet is again one very important additive used in literally all the types of rennet cheeses. Salt is another additive, and you know salt not only helps in as a seasoning for taste, but it helps in enhancing the shelf life of the food and also helps in dictating the texture of the product, that is the cheese, especially by expulsion of some more quantity of whey. The last aspect which we'll be discussing is classification of cheese. Now, since time immemorial, they have already tried to classify the cheese on basis of, for example, the moisture. Higher the moisture content, softer would be the cheese, and vice versa. So again, you have a soft variety, a semi-hard, a hard, a very hard variety based on the moisture content in the cheese. Again, depending on the type of ripening, it may be an unripened cheese variety or a ripened cheese variety. To give an example, unripened cheese variety, it's a cottage cheese or a mozzarella cheese. And if we take example of a ripened cheese variety, you have cheddar cheese, you have Swiss cheese, and many more varieties. So even certain based on the origin, for example, the place where that particular cheese had evolved, based on that again the classification has been given. So finally, we'll be seeing in the subsequent slides what we have in store for the technology of cheese part 1. Let us see the definition of cheese. Cheese means the ripened or unripened, soft or semi-hard, hard and extra hard product which may be coated with food grade waxes or polyfilm, and in which the whey protein to casein ratio does not exceed that of milk. Regarding the coating, in the previous years, olden ages, we used to use wax so that there is no growth of molds and yeast on the cheese when we are keeping it, especially for ripening. However, with the recent trends, we have come out with the polyfilms, shrink wrapped, and then kept for ripening, wherein there is no need to go for any waxing at all. Cheese is obtained by coagulating wholly or partly milk and or milk products obtained from milk through the action of non-animal rennet or other suitable coagulating agents, and by partially draining the whey and or processing techniques involving coagulation of milk, which gives a product with similar physical, chemical and organoleptic characteristics. Let me be very clear that cheese making itself is a continuous dewatering process. So any processing aspects we will be doing in which the water will be expelling out of the curd will be finally making it towards a cheese product. The product may contain starter cultures or harmless lactic and of flavor producing bacteria, and cultures of other harmless microorganisms, safe and suitable enzymes, and even sodium chloride. These cultures are the main ingredients which will decide, based on their fermentation, how much pH you will be attaining in the final curd, as well as the flavor you will have even after the final ripening of the cheese. Cheese may be in the form of blocks, slices, cut, shredded, or even the grated cheese. For example, the Parmesan cheese that is very well used after grating. Mozzarella cheese, which is used on pizza pie, is especially used after shredding. Even the shredded cheese after packaging are available in the market. Slices, especially the processed cheese as slices, would be the most deserving ones which a consumer would like to have. Let us see the basis of classification of cheeses. The classification can be based on, number one, the country of origin. Second is the type of milk. For example, in India, especially, we use only either cow or buffalo milk. But then you can also use sheep milk, you can use goat milk, and others too. The third criteria is based on moisture content, or that is the firmness of the product. And based on such classification, you can class the cheese as hard variety, semi-hard variety, and even soft variety of cheeses. To give an example, cottage cheese, mozzarella cheese, feta cheese, these are soft variety of cheese, whereas hard cheese, if you see, it is cheddar, gouda, Edam, etc. Internal characteristics. In this, we have to look whether the texture of the cheese is close or open, whether eyes exist, and whether any slits are there in the body of the cheese. To give an example, for cheese having eyes, it is Swiss cheese. Based on external characteristics, classification could be the hard rind with a smear or mold ripened. In certain countries, particularly the consumers would be very delighted to have a mold ripened cheese, and because of the molds, they already have a lot of lipolytic enzymes which the molds can produce, and a characteristic lipolytic breakdown products will be there which will be giving characteristic flavor to such mold ripened cheese like gorgonzola or blue vein cheese. Next criteria would be based on the shape and size of the cheese, and in this again the size will be depending on the weight which we will be taking in the block for pressing of the cheese. And finally, based on composition, because again if you see the legal, for example, Food Safety and Standards Act, you will see that two important criteria has been given. Number one is the moisture content, and that is usually the maximum moisture content, and another is a minimum fat on dry matter content. This fat on dry matter in the resultant cheese will depend on what was the initial fat content in the standardized milk, as well as it will also depend on whether the cheese has been pressed or otherwise. Let us see the cheese types based on the classification of the cheese. To take an example of unripened cheese where you do not keep it, say for instance 6 months, 2 months, or even more, the day you manufacture the green cheese, directly you can put it in the market as unripened cheese. The examples of that include cottage and quark. Second category is ripened cheeses. In this, after the cheese is made, that is the green cheese on the 0 day, you will have to keep it maybe after a little bit of drying for a span maybe from 3 months to as high as 9 to even 12 months for ripening, wherein the starter culture as well as the rennet enzymes, whatever is remaining in the curd, will be performing its action and you will be getting the desired ripening changes. These cheeses include Cheddar, Emmental, Gouda, Edam, Roquefort, Limburger, etc. In the next, that is soft cheese category, we have cottage cheese, Quag, Camembert, Brie, and many more. Semi-hard cheese examples include St. Paulin, Limburger, Stilton, Roquefort. Next, going into the hard cheese variety, we have cheddar, and particularly in India, this is the major cheese variety. We are preparing it and using it, converting it into processed cheese, and then finally selling it in the market. Other hard cheese includes Cheshire, Edam, and Gouda. Next category is very hard cheese, where moisture content probably will be even less than 35%. And this includes Parmesan and Romano cheese. Next category is acid coagulated cheese based on direct acidification, and these include cottage cheese and ricotta cheese. The ricotta cheese is obtained from, again, the cheese whey as the starting material. Another category is surface mold cheese, that includes Camembert. Next is smear coat or surface mold. A glaring example of this is Brie cheese. And finally, the stretched cheese, which are especially used on bakery products, including the pizza. These include the mozzarella, including the pizza variety, halloumi, oaxaca, and Caciocavallo. For each cheese variety, even in India, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India has laid down the specifications, namely for two different criteria, the moisture content and the fat on dry matter. To take an example, for a hard pressed cheese, it should have maximum 39% moisture and minimum 48% fat on dry matter. For semi-hard cheese, the maximum moisture is 48, while the minimum fat on dry matter should be 40. For semi-soft cheese, the maximum moisture content is 52, while the minimum fat on dry matter should be 45. For soft cheese, the moisture content here will be much higher, that is maximum 80, whereas the fat on dry matter is one of the least, that is minimum 20% fat on dry matter. For extra hard cheese, the moisture content is maximum 36, while the minimum fat on dry matter is 32%. Mozzarella cheese, not especially for pizza, to be used in salads and to be used in some other way, you have maximum 60% moisture and minimum 35% fat on dry matter. Pizza cheese, again, one of the categories similar categorized under mozzarella cheese category, especially for pizza applications, should have maximum 54% moisture and minimum 35% fat on dry matter. Coming to other cheese varieties like processed cheese, in this case the moisture allowed maximum is 47%, while the minimum fat on dry matter should be 40. For processed cheese spread, the minimum fat on dry matter is same as processed cheese, that is minimum 40, while the maximum moisture content allowed is higher to the tune of maximum 60%. And the last one is hard pressed cheese should have moisture content maximum 39, whereas the minimum fat on dry matter should be 48. Classification of cheese based on moisture content. As we very well know that higher the moisture content in the resultant cheese, softer would be the cheese and vice versa. So based on that, because again you need the cheese to be utilized for its end use application in a particular fashion, wherein either the baker, restaurant user or the customer would be craving for. So based on that, let us start with the first. Hard grating cheese should have maximum moisture content of 34%, whereas the usual fat on dry matter should be minimum 32%. Next, for the hard variety, the maximum moisture content should be 39, whereas the fat on dry matter should be minimum 50. For a semi-soft variety, the maximum moisture content is 50%, whereas the minimum fat on dry matter should be again the same value, that is 50% fat on dry matter. For a semi-soft but made from part skim, that means you have reduced the fat content of the milk used for cheese making, you have standardized it. In that case, the maximum moisture should be 50, whereas the minimum fat on dry matter should be 45. And the last one is a soft variety, wherein the moisture may vary up to even 60-65%, and the minimum fat on dry matter should preferably be around 50%. Now let us dwell into the ingredients that are used in cheese making. The first one is the milk and the milk solids. The source of such milk solids is very important whenever we are going to prepare a specific cheese variety which you have already decided to prepare. For instance, for cheddar cheese making, the specific type of milk suitable would be the cow milk, but then you can definitely also prepare from buffalo milk or even a mixture of cow and buffalo milk. For preparation of cottage cheese, whatever type of milk you use, maybe cow or buffalo, you will have to skim it off and start preparing the cheese using skim milk first, and later on, to have the fat content in the resultant product, you can use some low fat cream as a creaming mixture to have the desired fat content. The second ingredient is use of starter culture. It's very important because based on the type of culture which you use, the ripening procedure or the physiological chemical changes is going to change, and the final characteristics of the cheese upon ripening will be based on the type of starter culture used. For cheddar cheese, the type of starter culture used is Lactococcus lactis subspecies lactis along with Lactococcus lactis subspecies cremoris. Both of these are mesophilic starter cultures. Second, for the cottage cheese variety, again we use a mesophilic culture, a mixture of maybe 3 cultures such as Lactococcus lactis subspecies lactis with Lactococcus lactis subspecies cremoris as well as Leuconostoc mesenteroides subspecies cremoris. The next variety is Emmental, in which the type of starter culture used is basically the thermophilic cultures like Streptococcus thermophilus, Lactobacillus delbrueckii subspecies bulgaricus, along with Lactobacillus helveticus, and the very important culture to obtain the eyes in this Emmental cheese, that is Propionibacterium shermani. Slide number 7. Continuing with the ingredients used in cheese making, the next ingredient is the milk coagulant. For preparation of cheeses like cheddar, Gouda, Emmental and Edam, you can very well use calf rennet. However, based on some religious grounds, people would not like to take a non-vegetarian source, that is calf, and hence rennet substitutes have appeared in the market, and you can very well use the rennet obtained from the molds like Mucor mihi, Mucor pusillus and Endothia parasitica. These rennet substitutes act as good as what you used to get it with the calf rennet. However, the chances of some bitter peptides forming will be more when you are trying to use the more proteolytic enzymes like the rennet substitutes compared to the less proteolytic calf rennet. In case of cottage cheese preparation for coagulation, especially the long set process, mainly acid production by starter is the main one which is used as for coagulation. However, in case of other, for example, the short set and the medium set, you can definitely use some rennet to aid the coagulation by the acid. Next ingredient is flavoring. In some cheeses, especially the processed cheese ones, including the processed cheese foods, We can also take help of herbs, spices, hot and sweet pepper, horseradish, port wine, etc. These will be used as a flavoring, and obviously the palatability of the cheese will definitely be greater. Next is a firming agent, especially cheddar cheese made from cow milk. Since the coagulum formed by rennet is little weaker, if you add little bit of calcium chloride as a firming agent, you can get a firm curd as good as what you will be getting it from a buffalo milk without using any added calcium chloride. The next one is seasoning, a very important sodium chloride NaCl, which is not only used as a seasoning, but also it can extend the shelf life of the product and also dictate the texture of the resultant cheese. The examples wherein you will be using the sodium chloride include cheddar, mozzarella, gouda, Edam, and feta cheeses. Again, continuing with the ingredients in cheese making, the next ingredient is colorant. We can very well use the natural colorant, that is annatto or even beta carotene, as a coloring to have yellow color in cheeses like cheddar and Cheshire. Next ingredient is enzymes. In cheddar cheese preparation, we can already rennet we have discussed, which is used for milk clotting. Over and above rennet, we can use some proteolytic enzymes. This is used especially for accelerated cheese ripening. You know that generally with calf rennet, the ripening period required for cheddar is around 9 to 12 months. However, if you tend to use some rennet substitutes which are more proteolytic than calf rennet, in that case the ripening time probably is decreased to around 5 to 6 months. But even for this 5 to 6 months ripening, it requires a cold store room. You have to operate the refrigeration plant for so long, and hence if you can go for accelerated cheese ripening, which a proteolytic enzyme can do, your ripening time can be probably curbed to less than even 4 months. Another enzyme which has been used in cheese industry is transglutaminase, and it has been found that it can give yield enhancement in the cheese. The next ingredient, and that is optional dairy ingredients that can be especially used in processed cheese spread and processed cheese foods, include use of alternative milk solid sources like buttermilk powder, whey powder, whey protein concentrate, and even skim milk powder. If you feel that the casein content of the milk used is little lower, even the yield of the cheese is going to suffer, you can increase the protein content, that is the casein content of the milk, by addition of either some skim milk powder, even caseinates, or even the whey protein concentrates. Some cheaper milk solid sources like whey powder or buttermilk powder obtained from whey and buttermilk respectively can also be used because they are again obtained from the milk itself. And the last ingredient we discuss is dry dairy or non-dairy ingredients, which are highly used ingredients in manufacture of cheese analogues. Cheese analogues are cheese which is tried to mimic the original cheese variety intended to be mimicked, but made usually using dry ingredients, using even vegetable oils, even maybe vegetable protein sources, and finally made into cheese which will be having functionalities same as that which we are trying to mimic. In this case, the ingredients used are rennet casein, acid casein, caseinates, vegetable oils and fats, and even milk fat such as anhydrous milk fat and plastic cream. This slide refers to the use of rennet or rennet substitutes. The microbial coagulants that have been used by the cheese industry, especially in countries like India, where people shirk away from using some animal derived rennet such as calf rennet. The examples of such microbial coagulants include Rhizomucor mihi, rennet derived from these sources, Rhizomucor pusillus, and again the rennet enzyme derived from Cryptonectria parasitica. The latest trend in cheese making is use of recombinant DNA chymosin through genetic modification. These include the source where the genetic modification at DNA level has been carried out to have the recombinant chymosin are Escherichia coli K12A, Cluiveromyces lactis B, and Aspergillus avamoris B. In this slide, I am going to discuss the quality of milk used for cheese making. You know that the first raw material which we'll be using for cheese making is the raw milk. The raw milk, we cannot take any abnormal milk for cheese making. The mid lactation milk will be the best one for cheese, and we have to take care that mastitic milk is absolutely avoided, since you know the pH of mastitic milk is much greater than that of the normal milk pH. The second factor of importance is the antibiotics, presence of antibiotics in milk. If a milch animal is treated by a veterinarian using an antibiotic, up to 72 hours of the injection where whatever has been given, this antibiotic, some of the traces can come in the milk. When we prepare cheese, this antibiotic may inhibit the starter culture, and finally probably you may not get the cheese being made in the vat itself. Again, there are some tests like TTC, trichlorotetrazolium chloride test, which can also give you some idea about the presence or absence of antibiotic in milk. The compositional quality of milk for cheese making is very important, especially the casein, because you know majority of 80% of the total protein in milk is casein. So the casein content of 2.7% or more, and more so in case of buffalo milk, maybe around 2.8, 2.9%. And the total solids in the milk, if you total up the fat and SNF, should be around 14 to 15%. Then only you can get a very good yield as well as the quality in the resultant cheese. The somatic cell count, you'll be very surprised to know that even in a normal milk without any infection of the udder, the milk contains normally some somatic cells. Now this somatic cell, even in a normal milk, if it is less than 2 lakhs per ml, I think it is suitable for cheese making. Any cell count exceeding 2 lakh per ml, it may even hamper the renneting of the milk. Finally, the microbiological quality of the milk is again of very importance. Even though we are going to pasteurize the milk, kill more than 99% of the bacteria, even then whatever density or the CFU, that is colony forming units per gram, of the standard plate count we have got in the raw milk, lower the count, lower will be the survival and better would be the quality of the cheese. Even the starter culture which we'll be using in cheese making will not have to compete with those extraneous bacteria. And in books it has been written that less than 50,000 per ml in the raw milk would be more preferred for cheese making. This comes to an end of this particular module. Now to sum up, let us see what we just discussed. Number one is classification of the cheese. This classification can be based on the origin, for example, the country or the place. It can be based on the ripening or whether it is unripe. Again, it can be based on the hardness or softness of the cheese. So this is how, again, there are a lot of classification of the cheese. And the last which we discussed was the quality of milk for cheese making. And we saw that the composition of the milk, the bacteriological quality of the milk, the presence or absence of antibiotic in the milk is very important, which determines the resultant quality of the cheese, be it any type of cheese. Thank you all.